So all 8 episodes of the first season of Amazon Prime's Fallout series released on Thursday, April 11th. While the show hasn't officially been renewed for a second season yet, it probably will be, as they've already gotten permission from the California government with tax credits to film the second season there. And you are definitely going to want a second season after how they finished the first one. I'm going to keep this review relatively spoiler free, but I'm a huge Fallout fan, just kind of a Bethesda Game Studios fan in general. The Elder Scrolls series is my favourite game franchise of all time, Skyrim is my favourite game, love Oblivion, like Morrowind, love Fallout 3, love Obsidian's Fallout New Vegas, and I really like Fallout 4. I've played bits from Interplay's original Fallout games, but I've never really gotten too far into them. But Fallout is a really difficult series to adapt in my opinion, because the games are so built on who your character is, the freedom you have to go anywhere or do anything, and that's kind of the hook of a Bethesda game in general. That the world is your sandbox, and if you want to never take part in any major story, you're more than welcome to do that. Now for this reason, I feel like the show's decision to be set after all of the current games could not have been a better choice. Trying to recreate the story from an already established story and game would have fallen flat for a lot of game fans, but taking the universe of Fallout and putting a brand new story inside of that was the right choice in every single way. Now the first thing I want to shout out is the aesthetics and the production design in Fallout, because it's honestly unparalleled and like nothing I've seen in any other adaptation in any medium. Every single shot feels like it's been ripped from the games and put in live action. Like there's Radaway packs littering tables, there's Wasteland survival guides and Grognak the Barbarian comics just lying in view. The vault scenes also could not look any more like a vault from the games. There have been so many video game adaptations over the years that it feels like sometimes the people making their show are trying to put their own visual spin on it. That the names are always the same, general plot beats are the same, but in terms of how like the TV show or the movie looks, it's pretty far from what you'd expect a live action version of the game to look. Fallout is the complete opposite of that. Watching this show makes you feel like you're just watching a live action Fallout game. Like I don't know if it could be any more perfect in that department. The 3 primary characters we follow, who have each a very distinct and unique story, are Lucy from Vault 33, played by Ella Purnell, the Ghoul, played by Walton Goggins, and Maximus of the Brotherhood of Steel, played by Aaron Moten. And the very first episode kind of feels like an old western film, or even kind of like a Tarantino style film, I guess, in how it goes about introducing these characters. The first episode is split into 4 sections, the opening being one of the best openings you'll ever see in a TV show. It's fantastic, but then we get the title card and we roll into the actual episode, and the 3 parts of the actual episode are split between the 3 characters. We have a giant name card that pops up to signal each of the main characters' entrance. Like we start in Vault 33 and then we get a giant Lucy name card, then 20-30 minutes later we switch to the Brotherhood of Steel and we get Maximus's name card, then the final 10 or so minutes we switch to the Wasteland and we meet Walton Goggins and we get the Ghoul in the same format. And this was a really good way to introduce each of these characters in my opinion, and making it feel like you were watching this really great film. Like I really appreciate how different each of the stories are as well, because while there's an obvious overlap in the goals of each character, they feel like 3 completely separate storylines that you'd see in a Fallout game. Like the way I've been describing these characters is that throughout a Fallout playthrough, you would find yourself in the roles of each of these characters at a certain point. Like you might start off as a Lucy character fresh from a vault, halfway through your playthrough you might find yourself in the Brotherhood of Steel and you'd be more like a Maximus character, but by the end of your playthrough your character is like a lone wanderer and could be just like the Ghoul. While each of these 3 characters are here to introduce the world of Fallout and showcase a very different section of the universe, to me it also feels like the characters are stand-ins for 3 separate player characters from the game that you would find yourself in a general playthrough. And I think that is a really cool decision. All 3 characters are rarely in the same location at the same time. You get overlap between 2 at a time, and as the stories gently connect and weave, this kind of gets a little bit more, but overall the amount of time you spend seeing all 3 at once with them interacting is very small. But I think that this works super well and is a good decision, because when they finally do come together in certain episodes, it could not be more satisfying. It feels like some of the most worthwhile TV you'll watch at the moment in that sense, where there's a real feeling of appreciation for having these stories all come together and having them all intersect at certain points as well. Now by the end of the season, it's honestly fascinating how much all these different stories from our main characters, as well as a lot of the side characters, start to join together. And this is kind of a show that I think will get better on a rewatch, as it feels like there are so many hints and teases early on to what the actual story ends up being. It's no surprise given Jonathan Nolan and Elisa Joy are on this show because they worked on Westworld, but a major comparison is the first season of Westworld. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of seasons 2 to 4 of Westworld, but season 1 is a lot of mystery and a lot of separate stories that slowly interweave and come together, and by the final you're like, oh, I need to rewatch those early episodes. This feels like it changes a lot, and that's kind of the feeling here. It's a lot of mystery and this overall narrative slowly developing and unwrapping that once you have all the pieces, it works great. Now I actually think this works better here than in Westworld. Westworld, unfortunately, for me at least, kept getting its mystery get a little too convoluted and confusing in its following seasons. We didn't have all the answers at the end of season 1. For Fallout, it feels like a lot of the major answers and pieces of this mystery are given to you by the end of the season. That you currently have the main narrative and all the pieces by the end of the 8th episode, which is so satisfying and so welcome in a time of TV where everything gets dragged out. Certain character storylines now are far from over, and there are a bunch of cliffhangers for various stories, but in terms of the actual mystery, you kind of have the whole thing, and I do really love that and appreciate that about this show. I didn't really talk about any of the side characters because I think a lot of them can be pretty spoilery, but they're pretty much all great and really help to expand on this world. There's also a side plot involving Walton Goggins' character that I thought we'd get some of, but didn't think we'd get as much as we did, and that was very welcome. It does a really great job at expanding on the lore of the Fallout world and giving you a lot of information on things you didn't fully know yet. Now, there is a lot of backlash in certain places, mainly Twitter, about how certain elements of the show seemingly retcon Fallout New Vegas. I'm not going to address any of the actual stuff because that's kind of huge spoilers, but the show does not retcon anything if you really pay attention to it. How it sets out certain dates can be a little confusing, but if you look at that again, the arrow clearly points to a major event happening years after what the year says it is. And plus, the ending makes it pretty clear that the whole Bethesda hates Obsidian narrative is untrue, because the show is absolutely filled with references to events and characters and locations from New Vegas, far more than references to Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 in the show. And if Bethesda hated Obsidian, they wouldn't use any of their locations at all for their characters or for their events. They'd start fresh, or they'd be setting this show in the Capital Wasteland or the Commonwealth, and not, in the areas where New Vegas took place. There isn't really a whole lot else I can say on the show without spoiling it, but if you're a fan of Fallout or if you're a fan of just good TV, then it's definitely the show for you. It's already my favorite show of the year. I will be surprised if anything can dethrone it. I think it is my favorite video game adaptation of all time, for sure. Like Sonic, I think the Sonic movies and the Sonic stuff they're doing at the moment is great. I thought Last of Us was really good, but I think Fallout is just pretty much perfect. But have you watched the Fallout series yet? Did you like it? Did you hate it? If you enjoyed this video, maybe consider liking, sharing it to someone who might like it. Subscribing would be a great help too, and I hope you have an amazing day.